The film begins on a rainy night, on the road along which a van speeds, attracting the attention of the police. Having braked the unit, the officers find a shabby-looking girl behind the wheel who had forgotten her driver's license in a different dress. She doesn't respond to the offer to get out, and the car turns out to be chock full of dogs. A phone call wakes up Evelyn's psychiatrist. The interlocutor makes an offer that you cannot refuse to show up for work. Having transferred the child under the supervision of her grandmother, Evelyn goes to the police station to conduct an examination of the detainee. The patient turns out to be a van driver who smokes from a wheelchair. There is a fresh wound on her back. When the suspect turns around, it becomes clear that it is not a woman, but a man in makeup and a wig. Evelyn explains that her job is to determine what to do with him. The detainee introduces himself as Douglas. When asked about the presence of children, he says that he has hundreds of them, meaning dogs. To explain why he has such an affinity for animals, Douglas dives into visualized flashbacks of his childhood. He grew up in the family of an ordinary religious farmer who raised dogs for fighting. Dad was a totalitarian personality and prone to sadism. The older brother has similar habits, plus his intellect does not shine through. And although the mother loved the youngest, she did not have the right to vote. Little Douglas loved dogs. He secretly fed them, contrary to the prohibitions of his father, who needed hungry and angry dogs. Having learned from the elder that Douglas is violating the ban, the father decides on radical educational methods. He locks the boy in a cage with dogs, since they are dearer to him than his own father. The furry friends of the new comrade warm them up by covering them with their own furry bodies. Soon the mother runs away from home, being pregnant. She wants to raise her new child in normal conditions. Finally, she gives cans of canned food to Douglas, who is constantly living in a cage. So the boy survived the winter without even trying to escape. He still had nowhere to go. Evelyn returns home in the morning, where she learns from her mother that her ex, who is prohibited from approaching by the court, is hanging around the area, wanting to see her son. Douglas reminisces at the station. One day my brother hung an inscription on the cage that read from the inside as Dogman. Shortly before his arrest, he was visited by teenager Juan, who brought a puppy that had been thrown into the street. Juan asks for help. Martha, the owner of a local laundry, is being terrorized by a gang of a certain El Verdugo, taking away not only all the profits, but also forcing her to sell her own things. Douglas promises to help. Disguised as a woman in a black morning dress, he follows El Verdugo. A bandit arrives at a bar where his gang is hanging out. At Douglas' command, a small dog sneaks in with a phone in its teeth and takes it to the leader, jumping onto the table, and he calls. Curiosity takes over. El Verdugo picks up the phone. Douglas, at the same time giving a command to a larger dog, makes the criminal an offer that he cannot refuse. He leaves Martha alone, and in exchange he won't command the dog to bite his balls off. For lack of an alternative, he agrees. The first dog, having received the phone, runs away. The second one rushes after him. The leader orders his subordinates to follow the four-legged creatures, but they are already gone. Evelyn, arguing on the phone with her ex about the ban on approaching the house, visits the home. Douglas, reminiscent of a battlefield, there are traces of bullets here. Having grabbed his things, the woman returns to the cell to find out the further story and make a final verdict. The first thing the psychiatrist is interested in is how he lived in his father's dog shelter. One day, the brother noticed the puppies that he was hiding and informed his father. When his father came out with a gun, the boy blocked the way into the cage, growling at him. The dogs joined the riot, gnawing at the bars. In the process, the father accidentally fires a gun, knocking Douglas to the ground. The older brother takes his father into the house and throws a handkerchief to the younger brother to bandage the shot-off finger on his hand. When he leaves after praying, little Douglas hatches a plan. He puts the shot finger into a bag and tells one of the dogs to take it to the police car like the one on the magazine cover. The dog gets out into the hole that was not earlier. She hangs around the streets for a long time before she finds the car she is looking for and, jumping on the hood, places a bag with her finger. The officers promptly called their colleagues to participate in an exciting game, put the boy back together piece by piece. They break into the house and arrest the father and eldest son, after which they call an ambulance for the child locked in a cage. That day, Douglas lost the ability to walk normally. The bullet that lost his finger ricocheted off the wall and lodged in his spine. Doctors did not dare to pull her out so as not to damage the spinal cord. Now every stab can dislodge a stuck bullet and literally become the last. As a result, the father was sentenced to 20 years. He committed suicide 2 weeks after his arrest. My brother was sentenced to 12 years, but he was released early for good behavior after 8 years. One of the dogs waited for him near the prison and then chased him down the street. The furry chase gradually increased in size until it drove him to a dead end. They rushed at him and Douglas withstood the intrigue without telling how he died. By law, Evelyn must report if she learns of a murder in which a patient is involved. After being released from the nursery, Douglas ended up in an orphanage where he was unable to make friends. Children are less friendly than dogs, and no one wanted to play with a disabled person. But the boy met the librarian Salma, with whom he fell in love at first sight. The girl got him hooked on reading Shakespeare and performing in a theatre group where they staged plays by the British classic. Salma also taught him to use makeup, cosmetics and disguise to transform into other people. Stage productions made little Douglas happy and moderately popular. Soon Salma left the shelter, going to perform on Broadway. Douglas collected newspaper clippings about her successes into an album. Already as an adult, he attended her performance, and after the performance he went backstage to talk in person. To his surprise, Salma recognized him and was delighted to meet him. Douglas gave her an album with which he had been tracking her career. The gift touches the girl, after which a man enters the dressing room, the director of the performance, and also Salma's husband and the future father of her child. Taken aback by the news, the guest says goodbye and goes home to the dog shelter where he works. Coming to despair from the realization that he cannot find happiness with his first love, Douglas releases his anger with a flash of rage, for which he even rises to his feet. The dogs in the enclosures echo by barking and howling, at the same time showing ingenuity to open the cages. The animals surround the fallen guy and, as they once did in childhood, warm him with their bodies, licking his face in a fit of inhuman pure and sincere love. Douglas does what a real woman with a broken heart does. She cuts her hair shorter. But trouble does not come alone. The authorities want to close the shelter to save the budget. Douglas reminds City Hall representatives that the shelter lives on donations, and they only have the building for municipal funding. But therein lies the problem. They want to transfer the plot to the developer to make money. The guy is given until Monday to clean up. Over the weekend, Douglas moved into an abandoned laboratory at a local college along with all his pets, where he carefully read Shakespeare to them. But it takes money to feed so many hungry mouths. He is looking for a job and goes to interviews as actively as his position allows, but everywhere a polite refusal awaits him. No one needs a wheelchair user. Once, having found himself in a cabaret for one vacancy, Douglas notices a rehearsal of singing travesties, men in women's costumes. Having shed a stingy nostalgic tear on the stage of the orphanage, the guy offers himself as a performer. The owner is skeptical about the idea, but Douglas gets out of the stroller to dispel doubts. He can perform while standing, without spoiling the mood of visitors by looking unhealthy. A group of painted singers asks in chorus for the guy, and the boss gives in and gives the go-ahead. Soon Douglas is putting on makeup in the dressing room, preparing for his debut. His colleagues support him, roll him to the middle of the stage, and help him stand so that when the curtain rises, he appears in all his glory in front of the microphone. Douglas performs the French song exemplarily, as if he not only studied Shakespeare as a child, but studied vocals and studied the language of Dumas. After the performance, delighted colleagues do not immediately think to close the curtain and roll up a chair for the tired artist. After making sure that the new guy did it, the owner includes him in the Friday program. Evelyn clarifies what else he did besides his singing career. Douglas admits that he has helped people solve safety problems by selecting suitable pets. He says that the dogs obeyed him unquestioningly and understood perfectly well when he was cooking. They served the right ingredients. He just had to tell him. Having discovered this amazing gift, Douglas began to use dogs for expropriation of what was acquired by the exploiters of the working people. In other words, he taught dogs to steal jewelry from the houses of the rich. Having found a loophole, the four-legged friends climbed inside and searched the space for something tasty and healthy. The latter meant something that could be carried away in the teeth. Such disrespect for private property arouses the interest of the insurance company, which is obliged to compensate for the theft. In order to sort it out, insurance investigator Ackerman is sent to address one victim. After interviewing the owner and wondering why the watchdogs didn't start barking, he takes the hard drive with the CCTV recordings and goes to watch them. Sitting in front of the monitors, they rewind the recording back and forth until they notice a flashing dog that enters the territory and plays with the dogs guarding the house, after which he climbs into the house and pulls out necklace. Remembering a similar case, Ackerman asks to see recordings from street cameras. Long and painstaking work is rewarded. They see the same dog. Ackerman finds a video of a parked van with a dog running in and being driven by someone in a wheelchair. Having calculated the number, the investigator finds the culprit, but is in no hurry to hand him over. Instead, admiring the talent, he goes to a club where Douglas is performing in disguise. After the performance, Ackerman comes into the dressing room to thank the singer and invite him to dinner. Douglas politely refuses, believing that he is dealing with an ordinary pervert. He has no idea that the insurer is following him all the way to his house, after which he enters the territory. What Ackerman himself doesn't know is about security cameras. Douglas instructs the pets to prepare to meet the guest, who threatens the owner with a pistol, revealing his true nature. He needs the stolen jewelry to enrich himself personally. Douglas gives the code to the safe in the closet where the box of stolen goods lies. Ackerman is about to leave, but the owner offers to stay for dinner. The investigator agrees, not suspecting that he will become the main dish for a dozen dogs who, surrounding him, rush at the man on command. The story doesn't end there. One Friday, while Douglas was dressing up as Marilyn Monroe for a performance, Alva Dugo's bandits broke into the hideout. They identified one and tortured him into surrendering his intercessor, Martha from the laundry. Arriving at the scene, the leader kills the poor teenager and his thugs disperse throughout the building. Hearing a shot, Douglas gives the dogs the command war, and he himself armed himself with a shotgun. Cunning dogs lure uninvited guests into prepared traps. One was fried in a puddle with a live wire, another was simply torn to death, someone fell into a covered pit trap, someone was pushed there by jumping, and someone fell into a trap. Steadily overcoming the pain, Douglas gets out of the wheelchair to keep up with his comrades. He scores kills with a shotgun, finishing off wounded people in pits and shooting through walls. The number of bandits is inexorably decreasing, but the last ones managed to start a shootout. That's when the guy was wounded. Under fire, Douglas crawls away until Alva Dugo, armed with a machine gun, and continues crumble the walls into dust. Boss is stalking Douglas, walks through the empty corridors and finds him sitting in a chair. With blurry, running makeup, the artist turns hysterical. Criminal pulls the trigger, but is out of ammunition. Douglas raises his glass, giving the command to the dogs, and they rush at uninvited guest. Later, while smoking in the back seat of a police car, the man tells the officer that the dogs are his children. He nodded, gives them a command, and they rush out of the back of the truck in all directions. The story returns to the camera. Evelyn says that she has no questions left, except for the last one, why he opened up to her. That says they are united by pain. Coming outside, the psychiatrist does not notice the dog on duty opposite, which howls to gather the others. As soon as the woman has left, Douglas smokes and smiles, after which he shaves and changes into a suit. At this time, the animals enter the area and scare the duty officer, from which he falls, losing consciousness. Having removed the keys from the body, they bring them to the door of the owner's cell. Douglas moves out of his cell into the foyer and sees the sun rising directly above the church across the street. He gets up from his chair and staggers outside towards the church. Stopping in the shadow of the cross, the man turns to God, saying that he stands for his glory and that he is ready. Moments later, Douglas collapses, drawing his last breath. The stuck bullet completed the job. Only dozens of dogs surround his body, saying goodbye. At this time, Evelyn, nursing a child, looks out the window. She sees a dog lying in front of the house, the last greeting from Douglas, designed to protect her from an aggressive ex-husband.